Welcome to Procurability's Procurement Pathways, a journey into the dynamic world of procurement told through the voices of its most trusted leaders. Here, every story, every lesson, and every hard-won insight reveals how personal passion fuels professional impact, and how those moments taken together shape the future of our field. Today's guest is Aparna Thornton, Director of North America Commercial Procurement at GlaxoSmithKline. Hello, Aparna. Welcome to the Procurement Pathways podcast. It's wonderful to talk with you today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's awesome. Nice to meet you too, Stacy.
Thank you very much. In the busiest time of the year, so I appreciate you taking your time to get
I know,
away
but this
from
is
the
a
podcast.
nice break, so this will be good. So it's like, I'm doing my job, but enjoying it a little bit more.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Well, let's keep that jam going, shall we? Let's start by just inviting you to tell us a little bit about you, your background, where you are at the moment, whether it's company-wise or geographically or both, or let's get to know you a little bit.
My name is Aparna Thornton, and I'm actually currently outside of Philadelphia. I work for GSK. I support our U.S. commercial oncology team and our U.S. commercial respiratory team. It's kind of a great role. It's a business partner role, which is kind of nice because you're kind of like across all the categories. So every day is a little bit different, which is kind of nice. But you're kind of like jack of all trades, but master of none, which is good and it's bad, right? But yeah.
I'm really curious to talk a little bit about business partnering and your procurement experience and how that differs. So maybe I'll start with asking you how you got into a business partner role. Were you always in business partnership roles, or did you have other procurement roles that led up to this? What made you kind of get into this area?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, most of my roles, I think you are obviously familiar with like procurement. A lot of them are like usually the structure of like the category. You're like the global person. And you kind of have like a business partner element to your job, but it's not your total job. This is like the first position role I've had where I've just been the business partner, which is like, and it's good and it's bad, right? There's like kind of elements to all of them that have their pros and cons. So I think in every job I've had in procurement, I've always had a little bit of a business partner piece. And I like it because I'm a people person anyway. If you haven't can tell by like how much I talk and all of that. So I've always been like, a big like business partner with the stakeholders, business partner with vendors and things like that. So every role I've had, it's been kind of nice because I've gotten to know all of the suppliers. And when you leave, you kind of like, you still take that with you. So a lot of the partnerships I've had with specific vendors, I've taken with me to other roles because all roads lead back to the same place. And then also with like just even the stakeholders, I work with like stakeholders all over the place from like whether they're like a VP or higher, right? Or even across the board, whether it's like a brand team. Currently, I'm supporting sales and marketing, the sales and marketing organization, but I've supported different organizations at other places. So I feel like here it's been kind of a bigger part just because it is my current role. Whereas like everywhere else I've worked, it's been at least a little part of the role. And I think I got the best compliment ever one time was that somebody was like, "You're like the nicest procurement partner I've ever had," or like, "We actually like talking to you." And I was like, "Well, what did you have before?"
That is a huge compliment. What have you learned over the years in your procurement role that have basically taught you the do's and don'ts of working with, let's start with stakeholders, because we're going to talk a lot about different business partners, but your business stakeholders, your functional stakeholders?
Yes, I would say probably like even with like my first job, I didn't know anything about procurement, to be honest. I got lucky enough that this woman was like, "Hey, I have this job available," and I was a Penn State alumni like her, so she kind of hired me and like was hoping for the best and like probably like crossing her fingers behind her back. But it worked out. And I would say one of the biggest learnings there was I didn't know anything about procurement period, let alone, even any of like the commodities or categories associated with it. So one of the biggest learnings there, I was just like, I have to go and actually establish like a relationship with these people. And it means like not necessarily one where like I'm their procurement business partner or all that. It's just like establish like just a normal friendly relationship with these guys. So having conversations with them, finding out like what is going on, where are their like problem points, like where are they having issues with. And that could mean like it's like actually a procurement problem, or it might be like a process problem or something else that's like even bigger than procurement, and trying to figure out how to like solve it. And I think I mentioned it just before. It's like even solving those little things, it just builds their trust. Because I think that's the biggest piece, is like building their trust. Because again, even within this job, it's the same way every time you start a job. It's like how you do, to be honest, any job that's even outside of procurement too. Like you have to build some kind of trust so that they know that they can come to you, and then they'll start coming to you more and more. They'll start coming to you earlier and earlier. Like all of those things that like we always say, like early engagement, and all of those things stem from this relationship building. And that goes like, I know we're going to talk about it with vendors too, but I think it goes for the vendors as well. So.
Oh, 100%. And trust is a big piece of this, right? If you don't have that trust element with somebody, you're not going to get that, quote unquote, seat at the table, right? Is the phrase.
It's totally true. I would say the same thing, but I mean, it's the same way like established relationships in my personal life too, right? I mean, I'm tight with certain people because I have trust in them for, talking to them about my problems and things like that. I feel like it's the same thing. And I think that's like become a strength for me specifically, because again, within even my current role, I have to establish that with multiple groups of people, too. So you have to like learn their way of thinking, learn their mannerisms, like learn all of that, and learn how to kind of like read people, and not the way I, talk to you is probably the same way I talk to somebody else. It's just how it is, because we're all different, right? And we all have different ways of thinking about things too, and none of it's wrong. It's just figuring out how like to work with that kind of person. So I feel like it's a lot of like psychology that I didn't imagine that I would have in like a job, but it's been good too, because like I said, I'm like a people person, and I think procurement, sometimes people think of like as just like Excel people or contract people, and it's not. You do need those people that are people, because I think that's, you need to get in first before you can do any of those other things that you want to like accomplish. So
it's like learning the language, I guess, of each of these stakeholder groups, right?
Right. And like, I think they also are like interested in like, hey, you're interested in what we're doing. You want to learn more. And all of those things. Like I like to I ask them, I'm like, can I sit in on meetings with, when you're having your like normal brand team discussions? Because I said, there's definitely things that come out of that'll help me do my job and help support you. So, and I think they also like that, right? Like they want you to be interested in what they're doing, right? And so that's helped quite a bit with, especially because like I said, I've like kind of like jumped around in the last couple of years. So I've had to kind of do that and build up trust, because I don't know these stakeholders. Every place is different. Every one of them are different. So what works here doesn't work necessarily, even within the same company too.
And the value of that, I guess, goes way beyond the financial piece of it. It's bigger and broader and has more, I guess, long-term effects for the relationship when you look at it holistically like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting too. Yeah. So I think it's like about like, I think when I go in and like I talk to my manager, and I think I talk to him about this a lot now too, is just like, hey, it's not like the number of like RFPs I'm doing. It's not like the cost savings I'm doing. Like these are the relationships I'm building, and these are the outcomes of that. So we have conversations where we're talking about the outcomes, whether it's like process efficiency and like going into a negotiation and having a conversation like because of that relationship that I built with the vendor, it was like a success, because like maybe we didn't get cost savings, but we got more out of the service that we wanted. Like, even connections with like when we have good or bad feedback with the vendor, like being able to have those conversations and being able to resolve it and not having to like get rid of somebody. Like all of those things are really important, and they're part of what we can provide too. It's not like just kind of like the cost savings piece. Even within our own department, like some of the things that we've done this year is like creating like playbooks to make our own lives easier, but then also with like our legal partners, like how can we make their life, you know what I mean? So all of those things, it's like the end result is still like, hey, we're going to be able to do a lot more.
And I think about this all the time, that if you don't have the strategy right, you're not going to get the tactics right.
Yeah.
And that kind of relationship gives you the opportunity to be involved at a deeper level where you can really access both.
Yep.
And then it becomes this really great success story of what we did together because of that partnership at a larger level, right?
Yes. It's really important. I think like that's what I talk about all the time within like our bigger team. And then with my manager is like, hey, these are like also wins. Like, how can we escalate this and like show like this is a success story too. A lot of things that we also do around here, which I think is interesting. Like there's somebody on my team right now. He had done a big project, and it was huge for him, right? A development thing for him, but it was also like huge for GSK because it was something that we'd never tackled before. And so we go back and we have those conversations with our larger group, and it's like, hey, this was great. We were able to complete it, but there was definitely like some hiccups, but like, let's share that across the board. Like, here's some kind of lessons learned. Like, you know, we're going to be doing this again and again. And like, what could we have done better here? Like in that case, it was like, all right, well, he was kind of at a loss at some points. And I'm like, I think we realized like he should have brought me in earlier. Right. This was also a case where like normally legal looks at only like these couple documents, but it made sense for them to be looking at the larger pool of documents before, you know, we needed to engage a couple of these other departments earlier, compliance and things like that. So all of these things were like wins because we can share it with everybody else so that they don't have to go through it, you know? So we're doing that a lot more, which we weren't doing before. And I think it's just because, again, people are getting by with less resources. Like, so you feel like you're kind of running from project to project, but sometimes there's a benefit to like taking like a step back for like 5 minutes and say, hey, like, here's all these things we could have done better so that maybe it helps somebody else. So, yeah.
And then you see the big picture out of the whole thing, right?
Right. And we do that a lot. I mean, that's like everywhere I've gone. We do. And that's what I said. Like, I think as a business partner, that's a piece that I think I always say like what adds value is like we're connecting the dots because, again, we're not a category owner, but because by virtue of like me supporting 2 business units, I'm also reaching out to the other business units and finding out what's going on. And like, those are the things you can take back and connect the dots and say, hey, like, you're doing this here, you're doing this here. We both don't need to be doing this. That means like, okay, one of us can handle it. The other person can go do the other thing. So, yeah. So I feel like that's a lot of like my job too, is like the communication, like, hey, are you doing this? Or are you interested in this? Can we combine efforts here? Which is good, which is great.
One thing we talked about in prep a little bit was the importance of feedback and understanding where your stakeholder community is.
Yes.
And talking to your supplier community and making that connection so that there's transparency across roles, which I think is huge for a relationship, right?
Correct. And even like the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? All of the feedback and stuff. I'm like, hey, you know, this vendor wasn't performing here on this. So like, we're trying to give them a little bit of time to like work on that. So maybe this isn't the right time for you to send them out of bed, right? You know what I mean? But also we've been talking a lot about that with the stakeholders too, is like just having like that transparent feedback, like be open with all of these guys because the trust then is built with some of these vendors too. And they don't feel like your feedback is bad. So that means we're going to end our relationship. Like, let's try to talk about it as it goes so we can fix it. We don't have to transition to another one. For what? To take the same problem and move it over?
And feedback from the suppliers is just as important as feedback from the client. Because in some cases, these suppliers have worked with the company for longer than the internal team has been there. And there's just so much that we can learn from that whole process. So what is some of your guidance to both sides in how to kind of foster that?
Yeah. So it's interesting. A lot of things. I think like that big piece about transparency is really important, and like keeping engaged. I mean, I know everybody doesn't love having like those business reviews, but if you do actually a good business review where you're having conversations, like real conversations about what are the real topics that you're having issues with, let's talk about them face to face and figure out what the plan is, and then track that and like track it to a solution, not just, hey, we'll revisit it again in another quarter. Like, and it goes nowhere. And then even like the strategy piece, I feel like sometimes we get a little bit lazy with like, what innovation do you have? And it's like, just like this open-ended thing. I'm like, no, what is the problem that we have that we want them to solve so that they can actually give us a good response, right? Because they can come up with anything that they've presented probably to like 1,800 other pharmas are in the same boat. Like, but that doesn't mean that doesn't work for us, you know? So it's like being more like diligent about the agenda items and making sure like the appropriate people are there. I would say definitely learning is good transparency and all of that. And I think also building that same trust and relationship. Like a lot of my vendors are, I am friendly with them because they're supposed to be my partners. It's not supposed to be that visceral like relationship. It's supposed to be about, hey, like a lot of the times I think they feel comfortable with me too, because I don't leave them out in the cold. Like sometimes like we meet a lot of suppliers and I'm very open. Like I'm like, hey, I don't know whether we have an opportunity, but I'm definitely going to reach out. And I do a lot of, hey, can you do this? Is this like in your wheelhouse? Have you done this before? If I'm not sure. And like, that's how I get people in. I keep those relationships because you never know. And I would say one last thing too, that I've learned, it's a big point around procurement is to consolidate like all services with one company. And I get it. I do. But I think sometimes we do that with like a lot of like companies that come in and they say, I can do this, 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 and this. And we don't even give them time to do like one thing correctly. And then we have them doing 5 things at once. And then they mess up on something because like nobody can do 5 things great. I mean, unless you're like maybe like Beyonce or something like that. I mean, I'm like, but you can't do everything right. And then something messes up and then the whole thing is like turned off. And it's like, all right, like the one thing that we were bringing them in for, we didn't even get to use them for. So I feel like that's been like a biggest pain point, I think.
The supplier partners themselves sometimes have really key critical feedback when it comes to how we work with the third parties in moving the relationship forward. So we have to have an ability to listen to that, I think, and to take in that feedback from them.
Exactly. Like, right. And that's a really, really good point because it's like vice versa too. Right. And I think sometimes we just don't have that. It was interesting. I finally had like success with it here within like a couple months of us being here. We had a discussion with a vendor and, you know, our team was like astonished by what they said. And I was like, well, first of all, we should never have this conversation where like now we're hearing all of this stuff. You guys talk to these guys day to day, right? So that's like the first issue. And then second, I'm like, you can't get offended. Like it's nothing. We just have to figure out like what the path forward is. It's the same way we're giving them. If we want them to make changes, we have to probably make changes on our side. And some of the stuff is not necessarily you. It's just like one of our processes. And to be honest, if it's happening with them, I'm sure there's other vendors that are having this problem too. So if we can resolve it, your relationship by virtue will get better, right? It just makes things easier on nobody's stressed about something that we could fix.
Which in the long run just makes for a closer business relationship.
Exactly. Another thing I would say too, if you have built up this relationship with a supplier, and if there is a situation where you do have to transition, it shouldn't be like this adversarial relationship around it. You know what I mean? Like it should be like, this is kind of normal course of business right now. I mean, I've had situations where that too, where we had one vendor when I was working at one company and they were a smaller company. They missed out on the the bid process, but they asked for time with us. We gave them good feedback, detailed feedback. They came back 3 years later and won the bid because they took all of our feedback and they did something about it. And it worked out great. And like, there's, to be honest, like I just checked in with them before, like, and they're still there today because I'm like, they're doing all the right things.
There it is in an example. You make each other better through good business partnership relationship.
Yes. We don't see that enough.
I mean, especially, where I sit now, I just think this feedback piece is so critical for the element of closure, just to understand. Because it's a lot to put together some of this work, right?
Yes, it's a lot.
And how do you know where you fell down? How do you know where to improve if you really don't get that closure? Even something, it just means a lot, something small.
I mean, that's a really, really good point too, because that's what I always give feedback and I'm very transparent about it. I feel bad that these guys are going through all of that. If you already have preconceived notions or you already are deciding to go with somebody, that's okay. And you can do that. Listen, we've all been there, right? Like decisions already made, but don't go through this process because it is a lot of work and it turns that supplier off, right? So like if there's opportunities down the road, they may not be interested. So I said, it's a two-way street here. Like not just because you put out an RFP doesn't mean that they have to answer it. They can also say no too. So what can we do to figure that out?
To some degree, they're interviewing us as well, right?
Yes.
And they have every right to say, this isn't the right client we want to work with.
Yes. 100%.
So just to switch gears a very little bit, the importance of other stakeholder relationships above and beyond your core stakeholders. So the ancillary groups, people like IT and legal and other areas of the organization that can really be important in connecting the dots like you were talking about earlier and making sure that everything is a cohesive, strategic whole. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I've had great relationships with legal in every job I've had. I want to make their jobs easier. You know how it is. Like there's very few resources for procurement, but there's even like fewer resources, I think, with legal. Every job I've worked at, there's been like, you have like one legal person for all of procurement. And I'm like, it's crazy. And in my current job, we have a fabulous relationship with the two of them. I can't say like they're awesome partners. And I think what we do is like going beyond like, hey, just throwing the contract over the fence. I'm like, we've been in procurement for how many years? Like half the time you already know what they're going to say, right? So if I already know that, I'm just going to move forward and I'm going to call them when I need them. So coming to them with that and all of the appropriate approval information, it's like bypasses how many emails that nobody wants to get, right? And then like it bypasses like a bunch of time for them to sit there and like ask the same questions over it. So that's working well with them. I think with finance is, I will say in like the current role, like we do talk to them. I think what we are trying to work on is actually like strengthening the relationship a little bit better and having them be part of like the solution before instead of kind of like going through the whole process and then asking for like forgiveness at the end, and I will say like a previous job, like they were part of the RFP process. They were like, we were hand-holding. We're like, hey, here's what these guys want to do. We're going to be looking at this. Like when I'm looking at this analysis, does that make sense to you? Do you consider this savings? Do you consider this like an added benefit? All of those things. And that's been helpful from the get-go. And same with like compliance and risk. That team, great relationship with them as well. Cause I'm like, again, we're engaging them early. Like, hey, like this seems like odd to me. I'm not a compliance or risk person, but it doesn't drive. What do you think? And telling them like beforehand. And it's like, it's been great because they also come to rely on us and say, oh, great. Like I feel comfortable that, Aparna and her team are involved because I know that they're looking out for this, this, and this. Again, it's like, I think with all of those guys, it's just engaging them early is probably like the key learning I have with them. And even asking when I just think it's like an odd thing. The worst they can say is like, hey, you didn't need to come. Like, you're fine.
That's a great example, right? Then everybody gets a little time back in their day because you've already worked through that. And the more you work with a legal partner like that, the more you understand what you do need to talk about, develop a catalog of things, which is invaluable. And then, yeah, to your point, it just ticks and ties and clicks along from there.
Yes.
Beautiful thing.
Right. Or what have you had previous conversations on? Like, we deal with some similar contracts and similar vendors. I'm like, okay, we had this issue the last time, and this is how they told us to remedy it. Okay, so why don't we just move forward with that instead of kind of rehashing the same thing, unless there's like a particular nuance. Like, it makes their lives easier too. Like, you're supposed to be learning from them as well.
And then in addition to legal, you've got IT as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because it's like, they're like a separate part, but like they're a part of everybody's job now. So I think that one, I feel like for me, it's like still a work in progress. Cause like I said, I support an entire business unit, which includes their digital and tech teams. Right. But then we also have like an IT like category. So I'm like, when do I go to you? When do I go to that, and figure out all of this stuff? And I think like for everybody, it's like a work in progress too, because there isn't like necessarily like a centralized place where we're like intaking all of this stuff and that one person knows everything that's going on. So I think that one is still like major communication for me. Like I, communicate to my peer that's in the category. I communicate to the centralized like IT function, things like that, just to make sure I'm like, are we doing this somewhere else? Is this the right thing for us to do? Are you guys, is anybody else looking at any of these other systems? Are we choosing the right one? All of that, because I'm not the expert in any of that. So like I said, I'm like, I just think that's what's like a work in progress, and we're still trying to figure that out because it's just kind of in everybody's role.
And especially now with AI.
Yes, because that definition of AI keeps getting bigger and bigger. And I think, legal's trying to keep up the best that they can. Compliance and risk is too. So a lot of it is like just having conversations with them. I'm like, yes, I would define this as AI, or I wouldn't per your like current definition, but I know that's like ever changing. We have like multiple governance bodies trying to get a hold of that. And I know people are like a little bit stressed out about that, but I think everybody's doing out of abundance of caution to make sure it's going to somebody, right? So I think it'll get better. We don't all understand it.
And a regulated industry becomes interesting, right?
Yes. And I'm sure like that's why we have all of this, but I think every pharma is going through that now. To be honest, like every health system, whatever, is. And so, I still talk to my colleagues within the other pharma and even like outside the industry too, all the time, because I'm like, hey, like we can help each other out. As an industry, we all need to work together to figure out how to get better at all of this and safeguard. We're all having the same problem.
And that's a great segue to another business partnership, which is the external network.
I don't know what I would do without them. So it's interesting. I think like there's like two viewpoints on that, because I think sometimes there are like people are worried about these like secretive stuff, but I'm like, we're in a shared service function. My network is big. Like I said, I've worked at multiple places in multiple industries. There's something to be said about looking at like what other industries are doing too, right? People are willing to share. Like I haven't had any issues, to be honest, with anybody, at least like within the procurement world, that are not willing to share. And in some cases, they're honest about it. They're like, hey, I don't know whether I can, or hey, the most I think is like, hey, I don't know, and I'll find out and I'll share with you what I can. Or it's like I'm in the middle of like one of the RFP, so I can't share, which is totally fine. And to be honest, I've gotten a lot of like great like feedback on vendors, like, oh, here's somebody you hadn't thought about. And like, it helps because I try to keep those going, because that's the way for me to get interesting info about new vendors or new things that are happening that I can go back to my business partner, which goes back to that relationship too. So it's full circle. I will tell you a story. Like there's a company that I've been trying to get into GSK. And it's like, I get it why we're not there just yet. the guy, and it's funny, I end up like talking to him. I end up finding out he's like lives in my town. He's like a wonderful guy, and he checks in. He's not too much, and he has a lot to offer. They have like the whole company has a lot to offer, and I'm like, we're getting there. I mean, I know it's not going to happen overnight, but we'll get there, you know. But even there's just like touching base and hey, here's something else I have to offer, or here's like good feedback that I have. Like it's been good, and I know it'll happen. It's just a matter of time, and you know, so it's good. And like I said, I'm like, hopefully it'll happen sometime soon.
And having that relationship is half the battle, right? Because then you know what they do, they know what you do. You already have a level of rapport.
Yes.
So that when the time comes for a business relationship or an RFP, it's such a more straightforward process. And even when there's no business opportunity, you just stay in touch and just keep that network going, right?
100%.
Oh, Aparna, this has been awesome. I really appreciate all of the information. We've covered a lot of real estate, a lot of spaces within the business partner area.
No, this was great. No, this was awesome. This was great because it reminds me of all the stuff that I should also remember I have to keep doing, right? Like all of the stuff is good. So
again, thank you for all this detail, Aparna. This has been awesome. I have one more question for you. What is something that you've learned on your unique individual procurement pathway that could help others in your network, other practitioners along their own path?
Yeah, a couple of things I would say. I was like, I don't hesitate to actually like reach out to people on LinkedIn, like kind of blindly sometimes. I'm like, hey, if the worst thing that they do is like they say no. Like, even if I just say, hey, I'm like interested. I'm like, I've seen your LinkedIn this, like you have this experience. I'm interested in doing that. A lot of people are very receptive to that. When they think it's when it's that, not just like, hey, I see a job at your company and I want to do that. Right. So I think that's important. And then I would also say like, I think that this thing that you, Stacy, commented on was just like the relationship with the supplier isn't just about like when you have that like formal relationship within your company. It's about building that outside of that. So I still have like lunch or like a catch up session with some of these folks, whether it's like old stakeholders that I had, old procurement colleagues, anybody, and just keeping that kind of like other side of the relationship around too. I think that's big. So, I mean, there's a vendor that like she's been at like 8 million different companies, and so have I. And we catch up for lunch, and it's like very like we talk about our kids and stuff like that. It's not just like this business relationship. I like to make jokes. I like to do whatever. Like that's just how I am. So I'm like, hopefully that works for you. If it doesn't. But you know what I mean? Not you personally, but you know what I mean? Like, it's like, that's just how I work, you know? So I would say that.
Oh, Aparna, thank you so much. This has been such fun. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and chatting with you today.
You're very easy to talk to, Stacey.
For more than 30 years, Procurability has been the leading provider of procurement and supply chain services, delivering best-in-class advisory, managed services, digital, and talent solutions across industries. Global organizations trust us to transform their procurement operations, drive growth, and reimagine what's possible. To receive our latest thought leadership, subscribe to Procurability's Insights at procurability.com/insights.